Welcome to the serialized audiobook, The Reef. Written by Scott Sigler and Matt Wallace. Narrated by Scott Sigler. The Reef is also available as an ebook and is a full-length audiobook. If you want the whole story with no waiting, go to scottsigler.com/The Reef for links to Amazon, Audible, Barnes & Noble, and more. Hello, junkies. Welcome to The Reef, episode number 3. After the episode, I'll tell you what I think was Game of Thrones Battle of Winterfell's big missed storytelling opportunity. This week's episode of The Reef is sponsored by Stamps.com. Use your own printer and computer to print real United States post office postage, hand your package to the postal worker, or drop it off at the post office counter, and you never wait in line at the post office again. It's great. Learn more and get free postage at scottsigler.com/stamps. Let me get you caught up on the story of The Reef, and then we're going to stick and move. Previously on The Reef. On the run from gangster Greedock the Splithead, former MMA Galactic heavyweight champ Kyle North assumed a fake name and fled to The Reef, the most remote place in the civilized galaxy. But just like back home, The Reef has gangsters too. Prepare to meet Omeng Valenti, the baddest man in the town of Break My Back. Next on The Reef, episode number 3. Chapter 4, The Backbreaker. When he'd landed on The Reef a half-dozen years earlier, Dirk Tolouse had opened his first business, a mirror shop. All shapes, all sizes, all descriptions to suit all needs, commercial and residential. He'd been forced to shutter it after less than a month. What little money he'd had quickly ran out. It was on his third day without food that he had an idea. Like a lot of folks, his journey to The Reef had almost ended in his death. This massive, ancient corpse of an unknown creature was the last chance for the unwanted, the hunted, for those who had been kicked out of or forbidden to enter most civilized places in the galaxy. As such, they could rarely afford the fares of reliable, safe transport. The immigrants to The Reef were societal castaways who booked whatever ship they could. As such, rusted buckets of bolts seemed to crash on the surface every other week. When leaving the safety of a dome and trekking between towns and settlements, you'd invariably pass half a dozen such wrecks. Dirk was hardly the first resident of The Reef to scavenge or strip crashed ships. He was, however, the first one to see a particular value in the debris, a particular use for the parts of those wrecks that no one else wanted. He began cobbling together small motors, composite plates, metal framing, abandoned circuitry, and anything else he could find to make cheap mechs, small robots armed as sentries or equipped to perform simple, menial tasks. His first designs were hideous creations with the functionality of a toddler, and a particularly dim and uncoordinated toddler at that, but they worked. They were so bucket of bolts, so junky, that Dirk couldn't even bring himself to call them mechs. So, he gave them a self-effacing name that seemed to fit with their low-budget price tag. He called them shmechs. They sold moderately well, enough to put food on the table and a roof over his head. The only thing stopping him from further success was a seemingly unsolvable flaw in his power plant design. Within a few months, a year at most, his power plants melted down, turning the schmech once again into a pile of unfunctioning parts. Hence his still present no returns policy. When it came to schmechs, he openly told his customers that the buyer should beware. Fortunately, his creations were affordable enough that when one broke down, more often than not, the customer would just buy another. At 6 months in business, he made enough money to hire a part-time assistant. That was when the fates of the universe stepped in. It was that assistant who changed things for good. a Sklorno male of all things, with the unpronounceable name of Brokathon Kittyquanda Pascoacaphet. Tolouse had given him the nicknames Beans instead. Beans began just sweeping up floors and cleaning up the place, but within a few weeks showed such an interest in the building process that Tolouse started teaching him engineering. Beans, it turned out, was a prodigy. Together, Tolouse and Beans designed a new power plant design that made the mech stronger, faster, and far more reliable. Word spread about the new designs. To Toulouse's surprise, the schmechs began selling like wildfire. Soon, he and Beans couldn't stitch them together fast enough to meet the demand. With few on the reef able to afford mass-produced mechs, and fewer still merchants willing to ship expensive machines to the far end of civilized space, Tolouse and Beans had stumbled into an economic sweet spot. Over the next year, things went great, until politics reared its ugly, four-eye-stalked head. The handful of female Sklorno on the reef got wind that a male Sklorno was doing actual engineering work and making real money. Forbidden in the Sklorno dynasty. The reef was supposed to be free of such political bullshit, but some sentients will never understand the idea of a new world and a new start. The female Sklorno pooled their money. They paid Valenti to kill Beans. Valenti, ever the smart businessman, quietly let Tolouse know that Beans had one day to get off the reef for good. Beans took advantage of that offer. The little Sklorno grabbed the first off-reef transport he could find, an old freighter named the Oleron. Beans was gone, but his power plant design remained. And Tolouse made more money than ever. In the next 2 years, he went from a cramped, converted storefront with a suffocating lack of ventilation to his own 2-story auction barn. He gave that barn a grandiose yet still self-effacing title, the Tolouse Schmech Emporium. He built a house behind the Emporium. He was no longer a bum who had fled New Rodina owing far more than he could ever pay. He had become a man of means, a man that owned a flourishing business. Success, steady income, stability. On the reef, these things made him far more attractive to women than any pretty boy, than any muscle-bound merc. 2 years after starting his business, Dirk found love with Abigail Sarnecki, once of Rentito City on Tower. 1 year later came Javier, their son. Through it all, the schmechs continued to sell. Dirk began to export his inexpensive brand of mechs to other towns, and even opened new franchises in a few of them. To fund that expansion, he had taken out a loan. Dirk Tolouse became the mech baron of the reef. In retrospect, he wished he'd stuck to his single, successful shop. Lesson learned. If you want a loan, be very, very careful about who you take it from. A calloused fist collided with his face for the 3rd time. The fist belonged to a representative of the man who unofficially and unquestioningly controlled the town of Break My Back. Dirk tasted his own blood. The tip of his tongue wiggled a loose tooth. No, loose teeth. At least 3 of them. In this remote part of the galaxy, mechs were expensive. So were dentists. On his knees in his own shop, surrounded by schmechs, many of which could have easily killed the 2 thugs hammering him. All Dirk had to do was give an order, but he wasn't stupid. The men beating him might kill him, but if he fought back, his death was assured. "Little punk," said the man beating the crap out of Dirk. His name was Donnie. "You got blood on my sleeve." Dirk said nothing. The Quith warrior holding Dirk gave him a hard shake.
"Apologize,"
the warrior said. Sorry, Dirk said instantly. Really, I am." The human dabbed at the red blood speckling his white button-down. "You'd think you could teach one of these shitboxes yours to count," Donnie said. The warrior squeezed a little tighter. Middle arms held Dirk's waist, while the upper pedipalps clasped the sides of his head. Many warriors decorated their hard carapaces with painted and engraved symbols. This Quith, on the other hand, actually fused selected bones from his enemies to his chitin. Dirk could feel the skeletal trophies grinding into his back. "Please, I'm trying to explain it to you," Dirk said. "I overextended myself a bit this month. That's all." Over what, Tid? I don't know what that word means. Donnie said this without the slightest trace of shame, confusion, or anger. It means... Dirk had trouble thinking with his face aflame and blood on his tongue. It's the reason I'm short of funds. Ah, Donnie said. Short of funds, I get. That's the reason I'm beating your ass, to make you unshort of funds. He punched Dirk again, this time in the stomach. Dirk let out a squeal of pain, his final sound before his diaphragm locked up. He wasn't cut out for this. He'd had worse beatings, though, and from the same outfit. He'd been left naked out on the wastes, naked save for an air mask, chained to a metal post, waiting in terror to hear the sound of wind chimes, the sound of death. Valenti had relented at the end. But as scared as Dirk was now, it was nothing to the guts-turned-to-ice feeling of waiting for a Rama beast to come and eat him alive. A strong hand gripped his hair, lifted his head. "Talk to me," Donnie said. If Dirk could have sighed, he would have, but he couldn't because he had no breath, which also meant he couldn't talk. Donnie sneered. His other hand became a fist that he slowly cocked back. "Won't talk? All right, have it your way." Donnie started to twist his shoulders to deliver the punch when a new voice locked him up still as metal. "Donnie, stop that." Donnie released Dirk's hair, quickly stepped away. The quith didn't release his hold. Dirk still couldn't draw a breath. Black spots danced in his vision. He knew the new voice well. It belonged to Omeng Valenti, the same Omeng Valenti who had loaned Dirk the expansion money. The presence of this man here in Dirk's shop could be good or it could be bad. If it was good, the beating would stop. If it was bad, well, then Dirk was destined for a rendezvous with a Rama beast. Valenti stepped into view. He was a wholly unassuming figure. Average height for a human male, slender but neither willowy nor effete. He wore simple clothing. Tailored to fit him, certainly, but nothing lavish or elaborate that would draw the eye. "Merciful High One," Valenti said. "I am employing a legion of walking clichés. Donnie, how in the hell is this man supposed to answer your questions when you knock the air out of him?" Dirk's breath came back in one short gasp, and he started to wonder if he might not make it. Then his diaphragm finally relented and his lungs filled. "There," Valenti said. "Now he is capable of answering questions. Donnie, why are you beating this man?" Donnie looked uncomfortable, anxious, as if he hadn't expected his boss to show up and was now petrified he'd botched the job. You told us to collect, Mr. Valenti." "I did," Valenti agreed. "Now if only I could alleviate myself of having to explain and re-explain of what that concept does and does not consist." Donnie's face wrinkled. Dirk thought he looked like a dog staring at something that might be a treat and might not. Donnie began to say something else, but Valenti held up a hand in a silencing gesture. "Yes, Donnie, I'm sure you don't know what many of those words mean." Donnie nodded. "Savaging a being that owes you money accomplishes nothing," Valenti said. "In point of fact, it is counterproductive. If you disable him, you disable his ability to earn more money. Added to which, it's the fear of physical damage that's the prime motivating factor. Once you've dealt said damage, said fear is largely eliminated." Valenti pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. "Donnie, hold out your arm," he said. The bruising human looked confused for a moment, then reached the arm with the blood-spotted sleeve toward Valenti. Valenti ran the handkerchief against his tongue 3 times fast, then dabbed at Donnie's sleeve. "Bloodstains. Always difficult to get out. Mr. Tolouse, you have running water in this facility?" "Bathroom," Dirk said. Hot and cold." Valenti put the handkerchief in Donnie's hand, then waggled the finger side to side. "Cold water only, Donnie," he said. "No hot. Go to the bathroom and soak your shirt sleeve. Right now, before the stain sets." Donnie looked at Dirk, the tough guy snarl suddenly a mask of worry bordering on terror. Where's the bathroom? Back of the shop, Dirk said. Past the pink mining mech, then left. Donnie ran for the bathroom, as if Valenti had threatened him with an entropic pistol.
Forgive them, Mr. Tolouse, Valenti said. And please, forgive me.
No harm done, Dirk assured him, through loose teeth and a split lip. There was something about seeing a big bastard like Donnie almost crap his pants over a stained sleeve that established Valenti's power, and probably Valenti's temper, more than a few loose teeth ever could. Valenti sighed.
Perhaps as a silent partner I've simply been too silent, Mr. Tolouse. I've become easy to forget about.
No one in this town would ever forget who you are, Mr. Valenti.
Such flattery, Valenti said. It's almost as if you don't remember your near meeting with Dottie.
Dottie. That was Valenti's name for the Rama beast. The memory of that night, the mention of that name, the terror flooded back, and it was all Dirk could do just to stammer out a few words. I remember, he said. I remember.
Valenti shrugged. Maybe you do, or maybe you're tougher than you let on, and maybe that wasn't the right kind of motivation to get you to pay what you owe.
Valenti wandered among the many rows of patchwork schmechs. He paused in front of one, 3 meters tall, and painted in a red and white checkerboard pattern.
Demolition mech?
Dirk nodded. It didn't look like a demo mech, but that's exactly what it was. The fact that Valenti knew it on sight gave Dirk a bad feeling.
Ah, with an explosives launcher, I see, Valenti said.
Thermite? Dirk nodded.
So much more convenient than planting explosives by hand, I would think. A wise modification, Mr. Tolouse.
Valenti looked at the mech for a moment, then reached into the chest cavity. He pressed a recessed release button that unlocked the arm with a demo launcher. Valenti moved the arm, pointed the launcher barrel at Dirk. There was a tense moment, broken only by Valenti's gentle laughter.
As I said, there's no value in brutalizing you. There is also, apparently, no value in threatening you directly.
Valenti examined the mech briefly, spotting the internal controls. He rotated the schmech's body, this time angling it toward one of the shop's broad picture windows. A window that faced a truly lovely, well-built home erected behind the Emporium. Dirk's home. Mr. Valenti, what are you doing? Valenti popped the programming hatch on the schmech, began fiddling around with the system controls.
I'm programming a time delay and securing it with a 7. Oh, let's live a little. Let's make it an 8-digit passcode.
Someone messing with his work. Dirk felt violated and stupid for feeling that way considering what was at stake.
I don't believe in brutality for its own sake, Valenti said as he worked. What I do believe in, though, is proper motivation.
The man's hands moved with confidence, assuredness. Valenti knew what he was doing. Dirk felt sweat break out across his forehead. He'd had no idea Valenti knew programming, or engineering, or, apparently, both.
Mr. Valenti, please,
There we are, Valenti said, brushing his hands together.
All done. Such simple machines, and yet so effective in moderation. I set the time delay for 5 minutes, in case you were curious.
What happens in 5 minutes? Valenti smiled. It was a smile Dirk recognized. The smile of a maker who had just made something good. Valenti patted the checkered mech.
Unless the passcode is re-entered, this mech will fire a thermite charge at your home, obliterating it, most likely killing your wife and son while they sleep.
Dirk felt a new kind of fear, one that chilled his insides, made his balls go ice cold. The thermite would hit the house. If the explosion didn't kill his family instantly, the following fire would burn them alive.
Mr. Valenti, sir, I will make good on the rest of that money. But that transaction is complete, Mr. Tolouse. You have made it exceedingly clear the amount you remitted is all you have to remit. I accept that. I now open a new negotiation. I have a passcode to sell you. The price just happens to be the unpaid balance of that previous amount. Are you interested in negotiating.
There's a safe, Dirk blurted. I hid it in that half-finished waste ranger over there, the big blue one. The money is my reserve, my savings, for my kid, his future. We were going to get him off planet, send him to school in a city on tower. Valenti clapped his hands together once, loudly, cutting Dirk off, causing him to jump. Splendid, Valenti said. Dirk wondered how much time had passed during his rambling. The money is yours, Dirk said. Stop the countdown. Valenti smiled that smile again. Sorry? Please, Dirk said quickly. Please, stop the countdown timer. Of course, Valenti said. In a moment. But cash and carry, Mr. Tolouse. It's a principle of basic commerce, older than either of our grandfathers' grandfathers. Valenti's face suddenly shifted, warped from calm businessman smile to psychopath snarl. He shouted deeper into the shop. Johnny, stop screwing with your stupid sleeve and get your worthless ass in here! A shirtless Donnie came rushing out, so fast he slammed into the pink mining schmech. He slid to a stop before Valenti. Sir? Valenti pointed to the Blue Ranger. There's a safe in that mech. Schmech, Dirk said without thinking. Valenti rolled his eyes. Yes, of course. The schmech. Branding is so important, is it not? Donnie, find the safe. Be careful, Dirk said in a rush. The power plant is exposed. It's that brass-colored sphere in the torso. You hit that wrong and it'll overload and explode. Over the last year, Tolouse had intentionally added that design element. It helped with the payment plan, or rather with those customers who thought they didn't have to complete said plan. Get near the schmech, push a button on a transmitter, and schmech goes boom. The downside? Giving the power plant a good direct whack would produce the same boom, a boom that could kill everyone in the room. Donnie stared, wide-eyed, at Valenti. Boss, what should I do? Valenti glared at him with unhidden disgust. Don't hit the power plant, you imbecile, Valenti said. Later, I will explain what imbecile means. Now get me my money. Dirk tried to stand, was reminded sharply that the Quyth warrior had yet to release him. The warrior held him in place, while Donnie began rummaging through the Ranger schmech's compartments and partially disassembled limbs. How much time had passed? 1 minute? 3? Mr. Valenti, please. Protocol, Valenti said. Donnie looked up from the blue schmech, sweat matting his hair to his head. Found it, he said. It's locked. Combination? It's biometric, Dirk said. Donnie's face again wrinkled like a dog's. Bio-what-trick? You need my fingerprint to open it, you idiot! Donnie carefully removed the safe from the blue schmech, wincing as he did. It didn't explode. He carried the small safe to Dirk. The Quyth warrior released Dirk's hand. Dirk pressed a fingertip against the lock. The safe slid open. Donnie removed the currency inside, counted it up. He gave Valenti a nod. All right, then, Valenti said. Donnie, Whitall, let's go. The Quyth warrior finally released both of Dirk's hands. Dirk remained on his knees, unsure if it was okay to stand. Donnie, still shirtless, held the shop door open for his boss and co-thug, who casually strolled out. How much time remained? Minutes? Seconds? Mr. Valenti, the mech! My family, please! Oh, Valenti said. He seemed to have genuinely forgotten. He quickly walked to the Ranger schmech, typed 111111 on the launcher's keypad. A single loud beep told Dirk the danger was over. Valenti surveyed the shop shelves, once more taking in the bins of parts, the half-built schmechs. You know, Mr. Tolouse, the action at the weekly Triumph has gotten a little stale. Even with the talents of a showman like Renard leading the charge, business has lagged. Perhaps we could pit your mechs against one another. Might be amusing if nothing else. It could be a new business venture for us. Remind me about it another time. And with that, Valenti and his goons were gone. Dirk remained on his knees for a long time. He couldn't stop shaking. He also couldn't stop staring out the window at the immaculate and peaceful home he'd built for himself and the ones he loved.
If only he had never taken that loan.
That was episode number 3 of The Reef. We will be seeing more of Mr. Valenti in upcoming episodes, and even a bit more of Dirk. Remember, it's not a mech, it's a shmech. It's a branding thing. So, are you a Game of Thrones fan? If you are, and you're like me, Season 8, Episode 3, The Battle of Winterfell, was a bit of a letdown. If you're not a Game of Thrones fan, you can listen if you like, but there will be spoilers, and we're going to get into the weeds here. First of all, this episode, dark as fuck, right? Yes, dark as fuck, hard to see what was going on, hard to follow the action. The cinematographer of the episode, Fabian Wagner, insists the dark settings weren't his fault. He was quoted by TMZ as saying, quote, "I know it wasn't too dark because I shot it," end quote. He blamed HBO's video compression, which supposedly added pixelation and darkened colors. Now, there was a ton of pixelation there when I watched it. I assumed it was just from the streaming, but if this guy is saying the way they compressed it added pixelation, added darkness, that is distinctly possible. But here's the thing. This show's been on HBO for a long time. And if you know how it's going to be broadcast, you know, on HBO, which I'm pretty sure he knew, wouldn't you want to test some footage with that compression and see how it looks for your viewers? I would. Maybe he didn't. Fabian also said the, quote, "dark and cinematic show should be watched in a dark environment," end quote. Bro, you're telling your fans how to watch your product? They're already watching it. You want to give them the best possible picture you can in all formats. So come on. I mean, how many devices are there now? You owe it to your fans to try and make your product look good on phones, on tablets, on streaming, on super good TVs and TVs that aren't so good. And then, you know, a lot of people do watch stuff on a phone. What if the only time a diehard fan can tune in to avoid spoilers, you got to tune in as soon as they can. What if the only time they can do that is, say, stopping at a Starbucks and screaming when they are between their jobs? What if someone is so busy they don't have time to sit down in a perfect environment and watch it? You need to try and make the product appealing to those fans as well. It seems like they've lost focus on the show because that's a pretty pretentious thing to tell people how they should or shouldn't watch your show. By basically saying, if you don't have a dark theater-like environment with a great screen, too bad for you. Let them eat hot pies. Okay, so the storytelling opportunity. As I said, there might be spoilers here, so if you're still listening, that's your problem. Arya kills the Night King. I love Arya's character. There was a little bit of grief online that Arya was some kind of Mary Sue. There was actually a whole lot more overreaction to the few people saying she's a Mary Sue and people being outraged she was called a Mary Sue. Then it's 10 times stronger, 100 times stronger than the number of people who are actually saying she's a Mary Sue. Because she's not a Mary Sue. Arya has been in training literally this entire series since she's been a little girl. She's a badass. It's established. She's possibly the best hand-to-hand blade fighter in all of Westeros at this point. But you know what she can't do? You know what we've never seen her trained to do? Fucking teleport. In the finale, she somehow walks around a 5-deep ring of undead who are all there to guard the Night King. And she slips by the White Walkers, who didn't really do anything ever, when you think about it, to attack the Night King. Now, I have no problem with Arya being the one to take out the Night King. That could have been super cool. But it broke my suspension of disbelief that she went from fleeing walkers and needing a ton of help from 2 people to escape a handful of walkers. Keep in mind, one of her rescuers died in the process. And then she magically slips past 50 to 100 of them in an open area when they are packed shoulder to shoulder. And don't tell me about her stealth ability. Yes, she's very stealthy. But remember, she couldn't escape a handful of the lowest level zombies when she was by herself and she had tons of places to hide. Out in the open, no chance. It was a really weird storytelling choice. But here's the missed opportunity. Melisandre, the fire lady, the lady in the red dress who can light shit on fire with her hands. She said earlier in the episode she wasn't going to live out the night. Cool. So instead of having her walk out from the castle and kill herself. Have her die, creating a sweet, fiery distraction that would have allowed Arya to slip in and stab the Night King. With what we've seen, even in that episode alone, any distraction at all would have been enough for everyone to believe Arya could get to the Night King. I got no problem with the way Arya killed the Night King. That was dope. That was cool. Her getting to the Night King broke, for me and a lot of other people, broke the story right there. Going back to the storytelling opportunity, don't forget, we had Melisandre and Arya together before Arya grew her sudden power of teleportation. We even had Melisandre give Arya a pep talk. Not today. They were together. We could have seen Arya sneaking up. Melisandre could have come out, thrown a couple of fireballs, old school D&D stuff. She would have got a seriously heroic and spectacular death. Arya would have gotten a believable, logical attack angle to slip in. Then she gets grabbed by the throat. Then she does the old switcheroo and stabs him in the ribs. Would have been super cool. So I thought there were many problems with the episode. There were many cool things about the episode, but that weird teleportation to kill him was bizarre. And I think they missed a great opportunity to have Melisandre go out just straight baller and open things up for Arya. Would have been cool. That's my take on the episode. My biggest thing that stuck in my craw about that episode. What are your thoughts? If you're a Game of Thrones fan, go ahead and put your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss it. If you loved the episode and everything was perfect, cool. If you had other problems with it, that's cool too. And also, that is it for this week's episode of The Reef. We will be back next week for episode number 4. And until then, I will talk to you all real soon. You have been listening to The Reef, a Galactic Football League novella. Written by Scott Sigler and Matt Wallace. Narrated by Scott Sigler. Audiobook directed by A.B. Kovacs and engineered by Steve Rickyburg. Copyright 2019 by Empty Set Entertainment. All rights reserved. Theme music is by the band Amps and Volts.